This is Harriet Grayson, your host and producer for the Community Culture Showcase. And welcome. It's wonderful to have people in my audience in the studio back again. I hope everybody's doing things safely with the COVID still around. But our shows continue, and I'm really grateful. We have a wonderful guest today. This is a woman who has been around the block, as they would say, and she's written her memoir to let us all know about how things were a little tough in the beginning for ladies in business, and I can affirm her experiences. So please, it's my pleasure to welcome Mildred Devine. Hello, Millie.
Hello there. Nice to be here. Thank you so much.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you came from, and maybe something about your schooling, your roots here in our local community.
My roots are deeply planted in this local community. I'm actually in the house my parents had built back in 1937. And I went through the Waterford school system, first graduating class from Waterford High School in 1960. And my mother was one of four sisters. She was youngest of four, and they were all teachers. And two started off in one-room schools here in Waterford, well, not here, but across the river in Waterford, and went on to become principal of the old Winthrop Elementary School in New London, and started special education there.
Wonderful.
And the other one ended up teaching in New London also through what was then Jennings Junior High School, and she taught English and math. And so my mother actually started me in first grade back when, and so all my 12 years of schooling in the public schools was through Waterford.
Great, great.
Yes.
So then tell us a little bit about how you veered or got interested in business versus maybe becoming a teacher like your family members.
I originally thought I'd go off and become a business education teacher. That's what I was focused on. I had a wonderful mentor in high school. However, I was part of the college prep program in high school. And back in those days, they didn't like the idea that if you crossed lines. And so when they offered electives in typing, shorthand, and accounting, I opted for them because I figured, you know,
that's part of the might need.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Yes,
I mean, I expected I would get married, I'd have a family, but who knows? You know, life can deal blows along the way, and you just never know. So you've got to be able to be prepared. And I'm a very independent person. For anybody who knows me, they know I'm very independent. So anyhow, I started off going off to Central Connecticut State College to become a business education teacher. Found it was not the match for me, and called my parents, and that was after a bit of an episode, which I talk about in the book. But anyhow,
well, you can tell us about the book.
I'd be happy to tell you about my book.
Yes,
It's
yes.
Sunrise, Sunset, Millie's Divine Journey.
Right.
And it's easy reading, and the feedback I've been getting has been terrific. I love it when they pick up on different aspects of my life and things that, you know, they'll come up with questions and ask different things or comment about different things. And yeah, it's wonderful.
Well, it's the most interesting thing for me as just looking at it and as being an author is that you have such a full life that you've lived, that the book is kind of big because you've done so many things that are worthy of being recaptured.
Well, and that's why Jeannie Siegel from the Guard Art Center, I had not planned on writing a book, but she insisted that I had to write this book.
Right.
And now is the time to do it. So I've spent the last 4 years working on it with a wonderful writing coach, and Jeannie was there to be of help to me as well.
Right,
and
that's right.
Let me point out the cover of the book, which is being shown. That's from a painting my sister did.
Okay.
The milkweed plant, and to me, I think of the seedlings. When the pods burst and the silky filaments go floating off in the air, you never know where they're going to land.
Right.
And you think about the thousands of people that we come in contact through our lives, and we never know how we've impacted them. Until all of a sudden somebody comes up to you and says, "Do you know what you did for me?" And I'm like, "No." What did I do? And it comes as a complete surprise. And, I just don't remember all those kinds of things. And so the minute my sister finished this painting, I thought, oh, that's what it said to me. And so I knew from the very beginning if I was going to write this book, and I had not kept a diary or any kind of a journal. So it ended up being pulling it out of memory.
Right.
And the title obviously comes from the musical Fiddler on the Roof.
Okay.
And in it, the refrain talks about sunrise, sunset, swiftly fly the years, and one season leading to another, often with laughter and tears. I thought, doesn't that sum up life? And isn't that what has happened? Yes, we've had lots of fun, we've had lots of sadness, and it's all in the book. So I mentioned going off to Boston, to business school.
Okay.
And because I'd had the electives in high school,
Right.
I was able to do a 2-year secretarial program in one. And so I got my job through the school, and so I stayed on after graduation and worked in Boston for a few years, which became very interesting because it happened to be the time of the Boston Strangler.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that was very interesting. And
Yes,
so I talk
a little
about that in the
scary,
book.
I would imagine.
Yes, exactly. And so I talk about the details of that. So the book is full of suspense and circumstance. So, a little of this, a little of that. And
Is that your most memorable memories from the Boston?
No,
being
I talk
Boston?
about, well, from Boston, I have lots of wonderful memories. To me, Boston was like a big, small town. You're always running into people you knew.
Okay.
And unlike New York at that time, I could go to New York and it seemed very cold and never saw anybody I knew or, whatever.
Right.
But then I didn't spend the amount of time in New York either. So once I got more acquainted with New York City, I had the same feeling about that as well. But it was just, I was within walking distance of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, which was just a short distance from the Museum of Fine Arts there in Boston. So the culture and being able to go to a Boston Pops concert on an afternoon or evening for the Pops right along the banks of the Charles River. Take your blanket and sit on it was wonderful. So all kinds of culture and all interesting things that we would do and that kind of thing. So I really enjoyed my time in Boston. But unfortunately, the business I was working for after graduation decided to move from Boston, where I could walk to work, to Route 128, which is the big arc, the first arc that was built around the city of Boston. And they moved the business to Woburn, Massachusetts. Well, there was no public transportation to go out to that area. So I had to have a car, I was under 25, I had to pay compulsory insurance just the same rate as the boys did, all of this. And I had learned from the very beginning, you don't spend the principal. And I'm eating into it, and I said, I don't know what to do, because I felt guilty about taking a day off from work, calling in sick, and going for a job interview. And so the holidays, this had happened in the fall of '64. And so the holidays came up, and I was home for the holidays, talking with my dad. My dad and I were very, very close. He was a bread salesman, sold Wonder Bread.
Oh, my gosh. That's interesting.
Yes, delivered it to the stores, for the sales. And later had a restaurant route here in Groton, as a matter of fact. But anyhow, I was talking with him and explaining my plight and everything else. And he said, well, they've been good to you. Why don't you go back and give them a month's notice? And why don't you move home? I kind of looked at him. I had never even thought of being able to move home. I thought once you're out on your own, you were out there to sink or swim. And so my ears pricked up, and so he went on and said, go back, give them a month's notice. They've been good to you. You be good to them. And when you get home, you won't get vacation this year, so plan to take a couple weeks for yourself, and then start looking for a job. And when you get a job, you start paying rent. Okay, that all sounded very reasonable and businesslike, and that was fine by me, so I followed his advice. When I got home, a month later, when I got home, welcomed, was welcomed home, of course.
Yes.
And so then my dad said, oh, I thought a nice place for a young lady to work would be a bank. So I was talking with a branch manager about how you would go about it and who you would see and all of this. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. I need to get this my way. I'm thinking to myself, I've got to get this my way. Daddy can't get me the job. And so I listened and I took the information and I thanked him and everything, but I continued. I started looking for work and going for interviews and not finding anything I really liked or that appealed to me. And finally I decided to take myself down to the state unemployment agency. And I walked in and I said, oh, well, you're out of work, you need benefits. And I said, no, I left my job, I'm looking for work. Oh, well, in that case, you come over here. And so, all right, so they introduced me to the person who had job opportunities. I sat down and she said, we have a bank looking for a secretary. Oh, what bank? We can't tell you unless you're willing to go for the interview. Well, I'll go for the interview. So it was the same person I interviewed with that my father had gotten all the information on. So I thought, okay.
But you didn't want to look a good thing in that
No,
face.
no, not at that stage of the game.
Yes, of course, of course.
No, not at all.
So kind of bending your initial response, yes.
So what I have to lose? I went to see this woman. She was very stoic. I could not read her facial expressions at all because she was considerably older, had been with the bank a good number of years,
right.
Had worked her way up. And so we had she looked over the resume and all of that, and then she let me know that she was impressed with my credentials because not only was I a secretary, but I'd gone on and studied to become a certified professional secretary at that time. So I had the credentials. And so I said, but I know nothing about the trust department, because she said it was in the trust and estate business. And I said, but I know nothing about trust. It's all right, you'll learn. And I thought, okay, good.
They had confidence.
Yeah, exactly. So I could have confidence. Then the unemployment agency had also said that the bank was looking for somebody 25 or older, and I was only 23.
Mm-hmm.
So I owned up to the fact that I was 23 to her. Fortunately, there's no age discrimination at that stage of the game. And she seemed very shocked to think that, they must have interpreted when I said mature to be 25 or older, because we never specified an age.
Oh, interesting.
And she said, your maturity and all that, let me take you back and show you the trust department where you'll be working. So I followed her down the long hallway and saw this beautiful office with all its wood paneling and artwork and everything, lovely desk, big, massive desk and everything else. And I thought, but I never met anybody in the trust department. Didn't interview with anybody else. I just was interviewed by her. And she said, and you would start on Monday. This was Friday. I said, fine, good, I accept.
And that was the beginning of your business career. That was the beginning
of my banking career.
Yes, yes.
And I had a very good career. Some bumps along the way and things I talk about in the book itself. But I went from secretary, I worked my way up to be a vice president and regional manager. But the regional manager's job, they weren't sure, the bank was not sure if they were ready for a woman in that position. And this was 1987.
Mm-hmm.
Our manager had left, and I was made the acting regional manager. So I put my application in, and yes, I've been with the bank, for a good number of years at that stage of the game. And in fact, they had even offered me the position down in Stanford. Why'd I want to go to Stanford? That was a whole different experience. That to me was like going to New York City to work. Mm-hmm. And so different from here, where I was very much involved in the community and very active and all of that. However, there was one glitch. There was a male-dominated, solely male-dominated social club that all the male officers belonged to in New London, as did all the business male members, whether it was attorneys or accountants or any of the people that we'd be interacting with from the trust and estate business. And so the bank couldn't figure out how I would ever get anything done if I couldn't belong to that club.
That's the Thames Club, is that it?
That's the Thames Club.
Yeah.
And I'm not picking on the Thames Club because
Okay.
that's the way it was
Yes.
with male social clubs throughout the world at that time. It just happened to be that was the one that, at that point, as I saw it, was keeping me from getting the job I wanted and had worked for, and I was qualified for it. And I'd put my application in, and while they decided they had to not only go for national search, which was normal, but they had to interview the community to see if it was ready for a woman in that position. It seemed like it took forever. It was about 4.5 months of this waiting. Meanwhile, I'm holding down my existing job plus the manager's job. So doing both, and I'm thinking, something's going to start falling through the cracks here. And I finally told the manager, I said, I'm withdrawing my application. I'm not going to allow this bank that I've worked long and hard for my career, and I've built a good reputation. You're not going to spoil it because you can't make a decision. And I withdrew my application. It must have helped spur them on a bit.
Okay.
Because about 2 weeks later,
Yes.
they offered me the position.
Okay. You gave them an ultimatum
Yes,
in a nice way.
yes. But I also knew, because they had my resume and everything else, that if I had to put one together for them, I could easily send that out to others.
Right, to competitors.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
So, yes, they came through, but they still had this obstacle that I would not be allowed to join the Thames Club, and they didn't know how I would ever get anything done. Well, unbeknownst to me, the male community was endorsing me. And they saw no problem whatsoever with my being in that position. And they knew what I was doing in the community and had been very, very active. And, you know, because we worked on getting the Guard going, we got the Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut going. It was just so many different things. I started the Women's Network, and that's another story that we can chat about.
Sure.
So finally, now this is 1987. So yes, I got the manager's position, and this covered the eastern third of the state of Connecticut. And so, but the one obstacle was I could not join that club. However, because I had trust clients who were used to having their quarterly investment meetings there with not only their investment manager, but their account officer, their trust officer, they said I had to be at that meeting. So that meant the club had to give me special permission. And back in that day, the social clubs, if a woman was allowed even to come in like for a holiday party or whatever the situation might be, there were exceptions. Often you couldn't enter the same door as the male. Or if you could go in the main door, and this was true, we had to deal with these social clubs around the state in attending statewide meetings and this kind of thing. But if you had to, well, as I said, if you walked in with the man, he could not hang your coat with his. You had to go hang yours in the ladies' room. Well, fortunately for me, the Thames Club was very gracious. I got very specific instructions. I could come in the main door. I could hang my coat up in the coat room, which was co-ed, you know. And then go up the massive staircase to the second floor, directly into the conference room, and lucky for me, the ladies' room was right next door. Those were my restrictions. That lasted for 5 years of quarterly meetings doing that. 5 years later, at their annual meeting, they decided to open to women. And one of their past presidents, Elwood McMorrow, took it upon himself and came over the next morning and invited me to become a member of the club. And
You
I
know,
said
for
yes.
people who are younger, listening to you and this backwardness and this regressive idea is just foreign to them. We don't want to slip back into that kind of world.
Right.
We want things open, and we want things to be to be open to everyone.
Right.
And I worked for, in the 80s, you mentioned 1987, in the 80s I worked for insurance companies in the Hartford area, and then I worked for Mass Mutual, which is in Springfield, Mass. And they also, not as, I always thought they were pretty regressive, but in comparison to what you're describing, oh my God, they could have been...
saints.
Yeah, my God. But we had some strange things, but I did get up to what I found, and maybe this is the same for you. I found that you had to find a champion, particularly for women, to find men to some extent as well, to find a champion within the organization who was going to give you some credit, spread your name around in a positive way, and therefore perhaps open up doors for you. And I was very fortunate in that at Mass Mutual I did have a champion, and because of him, I became a second vice president there in a huge company.
Right, exactly.
We didn't actually get paid the same, and that became an issue. And then a few years later, they went ahead and started to give women not the same, but at least a lot more than they had before. And I mean, they're all Mass Mutual is an old style company.
Oh, yes.
So, but being an officer, you could eat in the dining room. You could park your car close to the door in those Massachusetts winters. That was important. So I haven't been there a long time, so I'm sure they've even changed even more.
Oh, yes.
And I see the commercials that they do, so I know that at least marketing-wise, they're thinking about making some changes, at least in the way they view their potential client base.
Right.
And that's very positive. That's very positive. We're now a much more diverse world, so they're started accepting. But I understand completely what you went through, because both insurance and banking were one of the most conservative, and to remain, I still think,
absolutely,
some of the most conservative businesses that are anywhere in the world. And so I can certainly understand exactly what you went through.
Well, and that takes me to the network that we both belong to, because back when we were coming up, you had the male service clubs, Rotary and Kiwanis and Lions, and most of those met, they were different clubs, depending upon where you were located, met breakfast, lunch, and dinner 5 days a week.
Right.
We women, the only time we could meet was after work. Well, married women had to get home to take care of their families and prepare dinner, and that was family time. So those women's organizations were more for single, older women, and you weren't getting the interaction. So the Thames Club also, while we were waiting for them to get to the point of admitting women, my boss would be, this was one who was not particularly a champion. I had one boss who was really a champion. He became a wonderful, wonderful mentor to me. But anyhow, this other one had taken over from that one, and he was the manager at that time. So he belonged to the club. And he'd come back after having his luscious lunch and all this business and rave about the lunch and, always kind of rubbing it in. And then he'd say, "Oh, Millie, this is back during the women's liberation period when women got out and marched with their placards and all this business." Right. Gloria Steinem was in office. She was, promoting women's rights and all that. So was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Both wonderful mentors to us back at that time.
Right.
Totally different styles, but wonderful mentors. And so he would come back and tease me and say, "What you really need to do is get your placard." Now, this started in the 70s that he was teasing me. They didn't open until 92. So 20 years later, they finally opened up. But anyhow, he thought I should get out there with my placard to get the club to admit women. Well, he also knew that we went totally against my grain. I was not about to do that. And so, you know, I took it in fun to begin with, and it got to be old after a while.
Yeah, and annoying.
Very, very,
Yes,
because
yeah.
it's a put down.
Purposely annoying.
Yes, exactly,
Yes,
exactly. And one day, I'd had it, so I let him have it. And I said, Brad, I don't want into that club. What I want is the same thing as or better than. Well, he said, if that's what you want, you better start yourself. Good idea. And I pointed my finger right at him. And I said, good idea, I think I will. And that's what got us going with the Women's Network. Well, there were not that many women in business and professional positions at that point that could get away and do this. So we started very small. We started with, I tapped 2 other people, and the 3 of us went and had lunch at the Ship's Wheel, which was then on when State Street had become Captain's Walk for a while, and so it was all cobblestones and all that, and Ship's Wheel extended out onto the walkway. I don't know whether you were in it. No, okay. But anyhow, that's where we started. So we said, if the men can go for an hour and a half to 2 hours of lunch once a week, we can do it once a month. So we set up, that was going to be our meeting place, and we would do this on the 3rd Wednesday of each month, 11:30 to about 1:30 kind of thing, 1 o'clock, 1:30, depending on what was going on. And so our mantra at that point was each time we got together, every woman had to bring another woman with her.
Right.
So it's kept building. When we got up to 40 members by 1976 is when we decided to organize the informality and actually formed officially the Women's Network of Southeastern Connecticut.
Right, of which on and off I've been a member for a number of years. Yes, very, very good organization.
Yep, and it does exactly what the title says. And we have not had to change our mission since the very beginning.
Right.
And the energy level when you attend those meetings is just wonderful.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
And we invite people to come and join us and attend twice, and then you have to make a decision as to whether you want to join us or not. Which seemed like
people were interested in getting some information about this organization. I don't think we have anything here, but you can, contact Millie, and
Yes.
And she'll get you some information about where the organization's meeting. With the COVID stuff, it's been a little tricky about where do we meet, but we'll there'll be a meeting place for sure.
Yes.
And again, 3rd Wednesday.
3rd Wednesday.
Of every month. So definitely contact Millie, and if you want some information about this organization, it would be certainly worth your while to devote, say, 1 Wednesday to finding out about what else is going on in the community and how women networking together can make business for themselves and in many ways make a nicer world. Because women are often not solely driven by making money.
Right, exactly, exactly. And we have mentoring groups within that organization, and the other thing that we did at the same time that the network got started, we had another group of women who were starting to put together the details for the Women's Center of Southeastern Connecticut. Now, the Women's Center deals with domestic violence. They started off initially with rape crisis and developed a 24/7 hotline. And that's when they discovered, we really need to address domestic violence as well as the rape crisis. And so they too formed in 1976. And the 2 organizations have partnered from the very, very beginning.
And this is Safe Futures. For
Safe
people.
Futures, yes,
in
changed
New
its
London.
name. Yes, in New London. Changed its name because now they serve men as well as women. And they noticed that about 25% of the people they were serving were now male. And so that's when they changed the name, and that goes back, I'm not sure which year it was, 2012, somewhere in there.
So tell us what kind of services are available through Safe Futures.
The kinds of services they provide. They do all kinds of counseling. They have a shelter for individuals, including children.
Okay.
They actually even take the pet as well, which most agencies do not.
No.
So they try to keep the family unit as close together as possible. The Women's Network at their meetings will bring in slightly used clothing or basic needs like toothpaste and toothbrushes and things like this, that because when somebody leaves their home in a domestic violence situation, they usually go with the clothes on their backs and the bruises as well, and the children in tow. They don't have much with them, so to try and pick up and build a new life or anything like that, they really are at the mercy of the center itself. And they will be taken in and provided and get counseling. One of the exciting things that we're doing, and I should mention that the proceeds of my book are all going to Safe Futures.
Yes.
Because they've just closed on property on the Hartford Road in Waterford to build a family justice center. And we are very, very excited about that because it'll bring all the services together under one roof, rather than they're having to run around to all these different places to go with an attorney or to go with an accountant or to go with this one or go with that one. Dealing with divorce, dealing with the whole court system, that aspect of things. Back when we started this whole thing, if police were called, they usually blamed the woman for causing the problem.
Right. Yeah, they were not cooperative.
No. And so you could not get a restraining order or anything like that. All of that is possible now because Safe Futures has helped build relationships with the police, with the court system, and everybody else that's involved in this. So they're bringing those services together under one roof.
I would imagine that part of the change has come as there are more women cops and women judges and just more women attorneys in the court system, so that they bring their own information, their own background, and their understanding of what's going on.
Exactly.
So instead of pushing it away, as police have been known to do for many, many years, they actually took the information down and oftentimes, might arrest the guy.
Right. Exactly.
So, when we start to get more people who share the same problems, then we get better answers.
Exactly. And Safe Futures does a wonderful job in working with them and getting them going. They're now going into the schools. I'm not sure whether it's any earlier than the middle school level, but I know in the middle schools they go in when the children are beginning to, the teenage years and beginning to build relationships and all of that, and talk about control issues and all the different things that are involved with potentially domestic violence.
Sure, for kids girls to be more familiar and understand that it's not only mom and dad telling you this is not a good guy. This is, you build your own instincts better so that you can immediately see this is definitely not the guy for you.
That's right. Yep, very definitely.
And I guess in the world that we've come, it's not only exclusively girl-boy, it could be boy-boy, it could be girl-girl. The world changes.
It is, absolutely. And that's why Safe Futures or the Women's Center had to change its name to Safe Futures, because now over 25% of the services they're providing are for men. Yeah.
So how did a business organization become interested in helping women who were having all these domestic problems?
Because of the partnership that we developed with them, and we have partnered from the very beginning, because other times when it's summertime and you have fresh produce, I'll slow down. There was one person who brought in bananas, and by the time it reached the center where they were living, there was a young boy, what are those yellow things? I said, well, they're bananas. It's a fruit. Apparently he had never seen a banana before.
Right.
And so, it's reaching out and helping people and educate. We've had a dear friend of mine was doing a lot of knitting. And so she started making mittens and all this to give to the shelter, so that the children who come in and they only have the clothes on their back and it could be wintertime, they have some warmth, and doing scarves and that kind of thing. And I have a whole bag ready to give them this year to get them going.
So if there are people out there who are watching this and they would like to make either a donation of money or actually some kind of product, just like we were talking about food, it could be clothing, whatever, they can contact Millie and she will give information to you about what you can do and who should you contact, so that especially as the holidays are coming closer, we can help these families have a nicer holiday than they might have otherwise. So we're always looking for the public to give us a hand. So contact Millie if you wish to participate or in any fashion with Safe Futures. How's that?
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yes. As a matter of fact, tomorrow night, the head of Safe Futures, Kathy Verano, and I are doing a Zoom presentation. You can go on to the website for the Southeastern Connecticut Women's Network, and there's a link that talks about go under events and look at it, and guests can sign up for it as well as members. So it is available, and we'll be talking about the different issues and all of that, and how we got the two organizations going, and the different aspects of things.
Well, because there's been lots of change in terms of the leadership of both the Safe Futures and the Women's Network, and yet despite that, the connection among the two organizations has remained very tight.
Exactly.
So that sometimes that's what happens with the women's organization. It's not only about networking to make money, it's about making the community a nicer place for, for your family, for yourself. So that's always been part and parcel. Right. But you are a woman, like a Renaissance woman, so there's lots of things that you have also done.
Yes.
And why don't you just tell us a little bit?
Well, I've done a fair amount of traveling.
Oh, everybody likes to travel.
And interesting enough, I tell everybody, travel as much as you can, because it's so wonderful to reach out and to experience people in their own native cultures, whatever it might be. And the last chapter before my epilogue in the book is the trip of a lifetime. I actually won a raffle. That was a trip for two aboard the Orient Express.
Wow, that's
and
a
I
cool
go
one.
into the details of that in the book. And then prior to that, all I knew about was the Agatha Christie novel, and the murder on the Orient Express. And beyond that, I didn't know anything really about the Orient Express. So that's my trip of a lifetime that I actually won.
Have you gone?
I'm sorry?
Have you gone?
Oh, yes. Yes, we went right away. My dear friend, I thought my sister was going to go, but she was going through a difficult time at that time, and no, she just couldn't go. So she encouraged me to invite my dear friend, Burl Hobart. And Burl and I have been friends for 60 years.
Wonderful.
60 years. We met at an MTA stop in Boston. And she married, has kids, the closest I have to having a niece and nephew.
Right.
But we've maintained that friendship for
That's
all
great.
these years. So she and I went, and it was fabulous.
So where does it start, the Orient Express?
It started in London.
Oh, it starts in London?
It started in London, and it was, the Orient Express had been around for a good number of years, and then with the wars and everything else, it had to cease. And so they were bringing it back, and the inaugural trip was going to be in '91.
Oh, okay.
And so I won the trip in '90, but then we had a war that was going on, and the details are in the book.
Yes.
But anyhow, so yes, it started in London, and we had to take the day train down to the base of the cliffs of Dover, cross the English Channel on the ferry, and then pick up the Continental train in France.
Wow. And where did it go?
From there, it was going on. It was the inaugural trip going and redoing the inaugural trip that had happened many, many years ago. It went on to Budapest.
Okay.
So we had Prince and Princess Michael aboard the train because they were going all the way to Budapest. Burl and I decided we'd never been to Vienna, and we had always dreamed of going to Vienna, and So we opted to get off in Vienna, which we did.
Oh, interesting.
And that was fabulous. We're so glad we did that. And then we we backtracked to Salzburg, and we're at the Mirabelle Palace where the film Sound of Music was filmed.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. And so we attended a concert there, and so I talk about the different details and the kinds of people that we met and all of that. So a lot of interesting experiences throughout all of the different travels. But yes, I made a point in traveling of going to each country that forms my nationality.
Okay.
Because with the name of Devine, immediately you think Irish. And I am Irish. I have the white skin of Irish and all this. However, my father was Irish and Scottish. My mother was English, Spanish, and French.
Oh, okay.
So it was Captain Gabriel Sister, again, I talk about him in the book, came over from Barcelona, Spain. So I had to go to Spain. But after we lost my mother, and my father had passed earlier, and then my mother passed. And after we lost my mother, my sister and I took a trip to Ireland, and we spent a 2-week tour of Ireland.
Okay.
And we enjoyed that so much, we went back and took a 2-week tour of Scotland, and another 2-week tour of England. And then, unfortunately, I lost my sister.
Oh.
And so then on my own, I said, I've got to get the rest of the countries in here. I've got to go to Spain and France, and I'd already been to England, so that took care of that. So I got 3 countries in. So yes, I made a special point of going to those other countries. And I went to Barcelona. It was absolutely beautiful. It was a very walkable city. And there's this Goya, I can't remember the full title off the top of my head. It's in the book, about the unusual cathedral.
That's still not built.
Exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
I've seen it myself. I've been to Barcelona several times.
But I think it's in 2026 that it's supposed to be finished.
Oh, okay.
I've got the
The
information.
guy I think who originally was doing it died.
Yes.
So they have to find substitutes to do
Exactly.
it. Yes. I like Barcelona. I found it to be, well, first of all, it's a politically active place.
Yes.
The graffiti, which is largely political, is everywhere. So they don't have anybody scrubbing down the walls. So was the first thing that hit me was, my goodness gracious, they are highly political. That was kind of fascinating.
Yes.
And the food is interesting.
Yes.
And it's on the coast, so it gets a lot of people from all over the world. The other parts of Spain, I was not as impressed with. I had been to Seville and Valencia and Madrid, but definitely Barcelona was something.
Did you get to Granada?
No, I didn't get there.
Oh, because Alhambra there is wonderful.
I'm still here, so there's more opportunity to go abroad.
Yeah. And I encourage people to travel as much as you possibly can, and just take it all in, because everywhere you go, you learn something different, and the people are so different. And
they are different, actually.
Yeah.
They're really, nationality, despite the European Union, the EU may make all kinds of laws for everybody there, but actually they are fairly unique. They may have a euro, which makes traveling much easier, because there's one currency for almost every place you go.
Yes.
So that makes things a lot easier. So that's useful, but they don't all speak the same languages.
That's right.
And there is enormous cultural differences, which we as Americans don't truly appreciate until we're actually there and actually meet some local people. And that sort of introduces us to the different kinds of culture. So what was your favorite place that you visited so far in your many years, not that many years, but do you have a favorite place that you think, I'd like to go back?
No, I have places I'd like to still go.
Okay.
Australia
okay.
and New Zealand. In fact, I was booked to go to a Rotary International Convention in Sydney. But then
COVID.
circumstances changed and I had to cancel the trip and all of that. So I have not gotten there yet.
I have very much wanted to go, but I thought, oh my God, that is such a long trip.
It is. It is.
Such
And
a
now
long
the
trip.
older we get, and that's another reason I say travel when you're young.
Yes.
Because then you don't have certain medication you have to take at a certain time of day, and
Yes,
you know
the
that gets thrown off with a
changes,
time change and all these different things that go on.
Jet lag.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And I know to begin with, you know, you come back after being away, you know, like for a 6-hour time difference, it didn't make any difference. You know, the next day, you know, maybe a day, okay, over a day, and you were fine.
Right.
Well, then the older we got, it took a little longer and a little longer and a little longer, and oh God.
Yeah, and of course now currently, who knows when you'll be able to get those two countries.
All right, exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
So what else is on your to-do list?
Oh, well, when in my epilogue, I talk about something that I wanted to get back to.
Okay.
And that was playing my classical guitar.
Oh,
And
all right.
I am
Said you were a
delighted.
Renaissance woman, so yeah.
I've had piano, violin, voice, and classical guitar lessons. And so all the music and all of that. And consequently, why I picked the name, the title of the book that I did, because it's From Fiddler on the Roof, Sunrise, Sunset, and talking about the, you know, going through the laughter and the tears. And isn't that what life really turns out to be? You go through so much with all the differences that happen in your lives. And so, yes. So in it, I said, okay, I kept trying to get myself back to playing the guitar, and, you know, but it was like 15 years since I had really played it. I could only get myself just so far. And I said, all right, when I finish this book, I'm going to get back to taking lessons. And I'm now back with the String Theory Music School. I have a wonderful instructor. I'm playing the classical guitar. I'm learning all kinds of new things and just having a ball with the whole thing.
What attracted you to the classical guitar since you did some other music?
Because I'd had violin lessons, I figured, well, it can't be that much more difficult to pick up and play guitar. I mean, I know you're not holding it at your chin, you're playing it down here, but, you know, okay, so.
String is string?
Yeah, and, you know, a lot of people were strumming, and because I became cantor in my church, so I had to be leader of song. And the priest who invited me to become a cantor said he would get an organist. Well, but he wanted me to start before we got the organist. So I tried doing that. I thought, oh, if I had something to give a pitch, because I'm a first soprano, which I have a tendency probably to pitch things higher than most people like to sing. So I thought, and when you have an organ, you can turn it down, you can adjust it so it be a more reasonable, you know, key to sing in. And but I thought, well, okay, well, if I could play guitar, I could at least get the pitch, and, you know, we could sing along with that, because a lot of the music was becoming more like some of the folk music or something like that was popular in the church and things at that point. And then, of course, if the organist had to be away and you couldn't find a substitute, you'd have to, again, go back to, or if you got sick or any of this stuff. So I thought, all right, well, I'll see if I can't do this. It can't be that difficult to play the guitar. Well, to try and play the guitar and hit the right notes, read the chords that you're supposed to be playing for the music,
Right.
strumming it the right way.
It's a lot
And
more
keeping the-
complicated than you think.
Yes, and read the words too, because I didn't have the words memorized. It was much more involved than I had ever thought. And so I had started taking classical guitar lessons way back. And it took for a total of like 10 years, but not, you know, maybe it was 5 and another 5 or something like that. It wasn't 10 consecutive. It was broken up because of the job and, you know, the hours I was working and all this kind of thing.
Sure.
So then I just got involved and said, okay, I really can't devote the time to this now. We were starting the trust department for Dime Bank and, you know, all this kind of thing. So anyhow, so I just started doing that. And of course, I love classical music, and Segovia the greatest of them all, as far as I'm concerned. My sister and I got to hear him at Jorgensen Auditorium at UConn when he was 93 years old and still playing beautifully. Oh, and if you ever get a chance, if you're interested in learning more about him and his music and everything else, get the DVDs. It's a twin pack that talks about his life, and he actually sits there and plays. And I mentioned Granada because one of the highlights was going to the Alhambra. Well, he was playing at the Alhambra in this DVD.
Okay.
And so I put all that information in the book because it was just, I'd been in those halls, and I could just imagine, the glorious sound with it echoing off and everything else. And the classical guitar was not taught in schools back at that time because it's such a soft, mellow instrument. You know, now that you can magnify everything these days. But back then, it's just playing, you know, the instrument itself and just and to me, it's so relaxing, it's peaceful. I love to sit down in an evening and just play.
So looking back at your interesting life, what kind of advice would you give to young women who are entering the business world in a crazy, chaotic world that we currently find ourselves in?
To dream their dreams and to follow up on them. Just don't quit. Don't let anybody get in your way.
Determination.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
And don't say no.
Exactly.
Very good.
And don't be afraid to start something new. Don't be afraid of failure.
Now, you never went into business yourself.
I did have my own business because I was forced to take early retirement. Do we still have time enough to?
Well, no, not really, but just tell.
Well, I was forced to take early retirement after 32 years with the bank in New London that I had started with. And I thought, I was age 55 at that point. To me, it was too early to retire. I had too much more I wanted to do.
Right.
But what was I going to do? I hadn't planned on retiring, and now I'm going to be out of a job.
Did you have so you didn't have a back plan, like a plan B, so?
No, I loved the business I was doing, and I had no intentions of going anywhere else. I was going to continue on doing this for the rest of my life.
And then the world changed.
Yes, my world changed.
Yes.
So
that's the advice you would give our young business women out there in the world, and don't wait for 40 years for the men's club to just always be exclusively men.
Right.
So Millie, I want to thank you for coming here and telling us and sharing with us your story. I think it's great inspiration for people. And again, what's the name of the book?
Sunrise, Sunset.
Perfect.
Millie's Divine Journey.
So find it in your local bookstore or on Amazon?
Amazon is where I publish through, so yes, you can get that in the Kindle or paperback. But we do have 3 shops locally in New London where it's available.
Great. So everyone, thank you for joining us today. We hope to have many more shows. COVID is not going to stop us from doing our thing. And I want to thank you for coming and joining me today. This is Harriet Grayson, your host and producer, Community Culture Showcase.